It hasn't been all that long since the state of Michigan passed a law that permits the mentally retarded to live in small group homes in residential neighborhoods. In the past few months, however, more and more community homes have become established, and the neighborhoods themselves, in many cases, have become quite angry. Following that anger, a number of lawsuits have been filed to try and stop those homes and others from being established. I'm going to try and find at least a little about both sides of this particular issue from my next two guests. To my immediate right is Gerald Provencal. He is director of the Macomb-Oakland Regional Center. And to his right is Donald Schuster. He is an attorney who represents the neighborhoods. Welcome them both to Kelly and Company. Mr. Provencal, why was the law passed? And why is it considered more humane?
Well, the law was passed really because I think that the state of Michigan recognized that we had done a tremendous disservice to people who were mentally retarded. For over a century, we placed them away in institutions that were large and impersonal, institutions that were custodial in emphasis. The law was passed because I think there was an outcry on the part of the legislature and the part of the general public who wanted to have mentally retarded people be considered as human beings like the rest of us. Why is it important that it's here now? It's important because we are seeing that mentally retarded people can thrive and they can even flourish in the community. And we're seeing that their families are finally given the kind of consideration that their children have deserved all their lives.
Can't see anything objectionable in those aims. Can you, Mr. Schuster?
No, I can't see anything objectionable in the aims. I think, though, that what you're talking about is competing rights, competing priorities, competing public policies. And there is certainly a well-established public policy favoring the natural family. I represent homeowners that have moved into subdivisions, moved into neighborhoods that were knowingly limited to natural families. They came to these areas to specifically raise their families. And in so many instances, there are already families in the neighborhoods that have retarded children, retarded members of the family, and they are openly accepted. What we don't like is when they place unrelated groups of individuals, be they retarded or be they mentally ill, in communities, and therefore violate both the restrictions themselves and the basic intent behind the restrictions. You've got the state coming in and saying that unrelated individuals constitute a family. And that's not the basic understanding of the word family that these people had when they moved into the areas.
What makes up one of these homes, Jared? It's a maximum of 6 residents, I understand.
That's right. 6 people who would be handicapped, mentally retarded people are the ones that we work with almost exclusively. We would have either staff working in the home around the clock, so there'd be supervision on a 24-hour basis, or there would be people living in. We have both models. We think that it represents a family, and the courts have agreed that it represents a family because the essence of family is really an interdependence, protection, interdependence, and development, and education, love, and caring. Courts have agreed with us.
How big is the staff, average staff?
If it was a round-the-clock staff, you'd have probably 10 people working at different times.
3 shifts, roughly.
3 shifts, probably 3 people at the most at one time.
If they're live-in, does the size of the staff change?
Well, it really wouldn't change so much, but the character of the home changes somewhat. Since you have people living around the clock, it's their home as well. But
so there are a maximum of 16 people then in a home?
Yes, never all being there at one time,
yeah.
Certainly.
What happens to make this objectionable?
Well,
You've already spoken to the family concept, and that's arguable at best, I would think. But are people get in trouble? Are there attacks? Are there peeping toms? A lot of traffic? What goes on?
I think that the first concern that the residents do have is whether or not, as a legal basis, these individuals have the right to come in. The residents, the neighbors, are very concerned about the state taking away their right to live as a family, which, by the way, was upheld by the United States Supreme Court in 1974. The court there said that it was very constitutional to have a restriction that defined family by terms of blood marriage or legal adoption. Now the state is coming in, and in the guise of saying we want equal rights for the retarded, is actually giving them superior rights. In other words, if you and I wanted to live together in a home, not being married or related, then we couldn't. But the state is now saying that if we were members of a retarded group home, we could live there. And that is not equality of rights. But now there is definitely then a question, a second question, of implementation of the program. If we're going to have the program, then let's have such a level of public accountability and implementation that the fears and the concerns of the homeowners will not arise, or that they will be addressed. We were talking about staff for a second. It's interesting that the staff members need only be 18 years of age, need not have any educational background, and need not have any prior training before they're placed in one of these homes.
Is that true? Excuse me. Is that true?
No,
as far
it's
as
not.
training is concerned?
It's true as a basic requirement. However, that's not at all the practice. I'd like to respond to about three things. that he said.
Okay, very quickly, because we're running out of time for this.
Fine. Well, with regard to the training itself, 65% of our people have bachelor degrees or are working on bachelor degrees.
Let's take the bottom line. There's an 18-year-old with no training, applies for a job, can't be accepted, is accepted. What happens to that 18-year-old?
He goes to the training program, which is 80 hours long. He or she cannot pass the muster unless they complete the training program with flying colors.
Administered by whom?
By the Macomb-Oakland Regional Center. It's a very fine program. I would invite anybody to attend it. I've done that before. The people who are working in the group homes are as qualified as the people who are working in institutions. There's never been an outcry against the minimum requirements of people who work in institutions, but suddenly there is one against group homes.
Well, I've got to split with you a little bit there. There has been quite an outcry. I'm thinking of Plymouth and other situations. We're going to take a break.
Fine.
We'll be right back, and this discussion will continue. Thank you. We are back. Let's go back to the staffs of the homes. You were talking about the training. How well monitored are the homes and the staffs after the training is completed and they are on the job and the home is established?
I think the homes are very well monitored.
By whom?
By the Macomb-Oakland Regional Center. We would have a social worker going into each home at least once a week. There is round-the-clock supervision of the staff by the administrator of the home. We have psychologists who provide services that go into the home at least on a monthly basis. We have a parent monitoring team that goes into each home on a monthly basis. We have parents who just come and see their sons and daughters at least on a weekly basis. The home is in a position where there's an awful lot of observing done by just the neighborhood itself. We think that the homes hide nothing. As a matter of fact, we think that they're very open, and we hold open houses very frequently.
Who runs the center? Is it responsible to the state?
Yes. I am the director of the Macomb-Oakland Regional Center, which is a State Department of Mental Health agency.
How many successful homes are there in the state? Or put it again another way, how many homes are there in the state?
I don't really know how many there are in the state, John, but we have 74 group homes operating, which are specialized in the metropolitan, the Macomb-Oakland, St. Clair area.
How many of them have caught heat?
We probably have 1 in 10 that reaches a point where there's some organized resistance, but it's always with maybe 2 exceptions, 3 exceptions at the most, before the home opens. The resistance comes when people feel that the concept is wrong, but after the home is opened and people move in, they begin to tolerate it, and they begin to accept it.
Isn't it true, Mr. Schuster, that a lot of this fear is related to an ancient, visceral fear of someone who isn't just like you are, coupled with a deep concern about property values going down because a home is in the neighborhood?
John, it isn't a question at all of property values. Property values are nothing more than an economic reflection of social values. And if a piece of property decreases in value, it's only because people don't want to live in that home, all right? If property values have declined, it's because other values have also declined.
I see.
Now,
So these homes have no effect on property value?
These homes, I would have to say that in candor, the jury is, so to speak, still out on property values. There's been competing testimony both ways. We have supplied evidence to court of a decline in property values. There's been other evidence on the other side.
I see. Kind of hard to judge in these times anyhow, I suppose.
Well, that's just the problem,
Yeah.
because the market is so depressed that no homes are selling. And it's very hard to decide why a home is not selling. But we've got a situation very often where the monitoring that we were speaking about is incomplete or ineffective, and the residents themselves are forced to prompt the monitoring service by bringing to the attention of the Department of Social Services the problems that exist. When an individual leaves the home and is, tracked down by a member of the staff, it very often occurs after the neighbors call up the home and say, one of your residents got out and he's sitting in my car.
Is there a case like that on the record?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I mean, it's not my intent today to rattle off all of the various incidents. I think we could all get into a fist fight as to whether or not they were the case or the exception.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been numerous incidents where the total lack of supervision within the home has caused an adverse effect upon the neighboring community.
How about, would you address the first part of my question to you concerning the visceral, ancient, perhaps unrecognized or unacknowledged fear of someone who is not the acceptable norm?
I don't think, John, that that really is their concern. In an individual's mind may run, an entire gamut of feelings. I can't tell you what is in an individual's mind.
The basic concern is an invasion of a neighborhood that someone took residence in, expecting one thing, and suddenly there's something else.
We have circumstances, though, where I mean, it is not an old myth, an old feeling, an inborn feeling of somebody being different that bothers a person when they want to go to bed at night and they hear screaming from next door. I mean, screaming is screaming. And we have testimony from staff members that very often they are unable to stop the screaming. They are unable to stop the breaking of windows, the damaging of walls. One of the biggest incidents, the home in Novi, came to the attention of the Department of Mental Health and Department of Social Services because the staff members were raising complaints about the fact that they were given improper guidance and they were given improper supervision and they couldn't handle the situation. They had residents within that home that they simply could not take care of. And then it was later noted by the Department of Mental Health that they were experimenting with the placement of people with aggressive tendencies. And the thought of a neighborhood unknowingly being guinea pigs to an experiment in placing aggressive individuals is intolerable.
It's total misrepresentation of the facts, and I'm not surprised to hear it from Mr. Schuster. Because
There were not experimental placements?
Absolutely not. First of all, the staff that Mr. Schuster is referring to were staff that were fired for incompetence. That's where the testimony comes from. Secondly, the neighborhood that he's referring to in Novi, I will admit we've had problems with. We've had problems in that neighborhood. We've had problems with two families in particular who have not liked the home. He does not point out, however, that most of the neighbors in that immediate vicinity have been accepting. As a matter of fact, when one neighbor complains, other neighbors are coming across the street with cakes and encouragement. It's very, very unfair, terribly unfair, almost obscene to suggest it because you have a problem in a specific home that it indicts the program. Surveys show that, and these aren't Macomb-Oakland or Gerald Provencal surveys, but they're Lou Harris polls have taken on a national level, show that 90% of the people favored this concept, the general public. Locally, the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press have both taken polls that show between 69 and 79% of the people would favor a home being moved in on the street. All of the major associations of handicapped individuals favor the program. The Michigan Lutheran Church, United Methodist Church, Catholic churches in the area are all favoring the concept. If you say that one single home and one single incident, or 3 or 4 or whatever, out of thousands indicts a program, then I think that we're all in deep trouble.
Excuse me. What I find, I'm going to use the word reprehensible. We came in possession of a copy of a letter that was sent to the residents of the Township of Commerce. It's almost gobbledygook. I don't know, maybe the man who wrote the letter really doesn't have a grasp on standard letter writing procedures, but in nowhere in a letter, let's see if you can see how much typing is there, quite a bit. And nowhere in this letter does it say exactly what's going to take place in the license, should the license be granted. This is an application for one of these group homes. It refers to it as a pending AFC small group home license application for a proposed facility to be located at Alsop Avenue. Doesn't say what it's going to do. There's a copy of the license application notice, and again, in this form, does it say precisely what's going to be done. It gives you, sent to you pursuant to the Zoning Requirements Act number 28, Citizen Village Act number 29, Unincorporated Rights of Frats Act number 30, Portions County laying outside. I mean, it's going to take a trained attorney to understand what this says. On the back, it does refer to 3 public acts of 1977. It says that they state in part that, and somewhere in here, let me find it because you get the idea, just the idea, the drift of what this residence is going to be. When it says, goes through the Public Acts 1973 as amended, Section 722.111, 722.128, Michigan compiled laws, which provides residence services for 6 or less persons under 24-hour supervision of care for persons in need of that supervision or care. Why can't these governments, from the state down to the township, just say, dear folks, there is an organization that has applied for a license for a home that will contain a maximum of 6 mentally handicapped individuals under supervision.
Fine.
It's going to be located here. I think we're all fed up with this kind of thing, and frankly, if this came to me and I did figure it out, I'd be mad at the beginning at the government for sending it to me.
All right. Fine. No, please. This is
Listen,
mine.
after this swell indictment, I want to give you a minute to think about it because I have to take a break. I've just been given the cue. Then your answer. We'll be right back. Okay, I hit you with this thing just prior to the break, Mr. Provencal. Would you like to answer
Yes,
now?
I think that it's important to point out that each local government decides how they will notify the neighbors in the area of a home that's proposed. Each local government has that responsibility by law. Some use rather succinct, maybe even terse statements such as that. Others hold public hearings. Others go door to door with handbills. The responsibility is not that of the Department of Mental Health or myself to notify the neighbors, although we would do that, and we almost always do that after the public notice is given by the community. But it is a local government matter. Mayor, city manager, township supervisor, they are the individuals who send out the notices. And that's not our responsibility nor our fault. Second part of the answer is this. I think that if any of us was going to move into a neighborhood and our future neighbors received the notice that we were moving in, we would all be put on notice. My gosh, why am I being told about these people who are moving in? And when you alert people that you are so different that you must be notified of your coming, it sets off all kinds of superstitions and all kinds of fears. And that's part of the problem, frankly.
Okay, sir, you had something to say. Would you stand, please?
Is the homes built, are they built by private individuals that want to invest to build a home, or by the state?
By private individuals.
And then they lease them to the people who run the home, or?
That's right. The homes are built or purchased by a private landlord in the community. That way we keep the money in the community. They are leased back to a nonprofit corporation, the specialized homes, and the state then supervises the management of the homes and the supervision of the clients, residents.
John, if I could comment on that,
Sure.
This idea of keeping the money in the community is a very unique theory and would be perhaps a little more palatable if you were to limit one investor or an investor to one home. But unfortunately, you have individuals that own and lease these homes to the state in a variety of different communities. And therefore, one individual may own homes in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, and he's doing it simply for his rate of return on the property. He's not doing it for any altruistic purpose whatsoever.
No, it's a business,
It's simply a business.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't know if we should go into the business, the profit-making business of taking care of the retarded, though.
Well, the way I look at it is this. The way it's been operated so far, some people have a choice, but the other people have none. Why couldn't it be that a subdivision could be set up, since we need housing so badly, and it would also help the labor force? Why can't a subdivision be set up with this in mind, that these homes can be built, so many in each subdivision, and the rest be left to the public? And then if the public decides they want to live in this particular subdivision, that's their choice. And if they don't want to live there, they just don't have to bother anybody. They just don't buy there. But the way it's working out now, you have lawyers and the government fighting each other, and they're trying to force something onto a subdivision that maybe has been in existence for 10 or 15 years with a certain class or type of people. Or the other way would be to have the state, even if they have to sell the home, set up a subdivision where so many of these homes for retarded people can live. And if the general public wants to buy in that subdivision, fine. In other words, there's choice for both. Thank you.
Of course, there would be no choice for the retarded person or the handicapped person if you set up a subdivision. It would just be one more kind of institution, and we're trying to get desperately away from that. We do have new subdivisions where we're moving in homes before other homes are being built, however. That has been the case, and people can choose to live there or not.
Yes, ma'am.
I have just a general comment to make. I think the general attitude of the people as a whole is very sad because in my family, my sister-in-law had a mongoloid baby, and the doctor just came in and said, well, you don't even want to see him. He's mongoloid. I recommend you just put him away. And today this baby's 12 years old, and he didn't expect to live 8, and with a lot of love and understanding, he has done a lot of good things. He's a vital member of the family and of the community where he's living right now. And I don't know, I think the people, when they face problems like this, all they want to do is shut them away, put them away, get them out of, I don't want to deal with it because it's not, it's something that's not normal. And
Is this 12-year-old boy living in a community home such as is under discussion today?
he's living with his family, but he is a member of a community where he's living. I mean, he participates. He goes to school. He plays with the neighborhood kids. He's not normal like you and me, but he's existing. He's living in his own. He's living. He's, participating in life. And I think we should give these people a chance just to live a life. No, he's here. These people are here. Why can't they live the best way they can?
John, I think that I don't think that any individual can have any quarrel with what the woman has said. In fact, it speaks very highly for the fact that that individual's parents chose to keep him in their family. And I think that a lot of the problems that we're facing today are a direct result of people who, out of frustration, out of any one of a number of reasons, have chosen to send their children or their brothers or sisters to institutions. We strongly recommend that families take care of their retarded children or their retarded family members, and we have obviously no fault with them existing in peaceful harmony with all the other family members. What happens when they can't? How do you mean, by age or by condition or
They
what?
cannot take care of them.
Then the emphasis should be on the quality of the care and not necessarily the location of the care. We are not talking about black and white, about institutions or subdivision living. There's a wide spectrum in between. For example, one of the local newspapers spoke yesterday about the Clinton Valley Center placing more emphasis on the use of cottages, where they could live in bigger numbers than just 4 or 5 and yet not have an institutional setting.
We have to take a break. We'll be right back and take as many questions as we can, and there are many. Right back. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I've come a long ways, and I feel that people who are institutionalized really don't have a choice. And I feel very privileged that I'm able to stand up here. The lady back here covered a lot. That if we don't understand everything that really happens in a person's life, sometimes we judge them by the way they look on the outside, but all of us loses our cool once in a while. And I think sometimes the neighbors cause more problems than the people actually that are inside, because we all have different upbringings.
What did you mean when you said you'd come a long way?
I was institutionalized once, a few years back, for mental health. I kept my kids home. I have 8, and I'm very happy that I'm back into my home with my kids. My home was kind of a disastrous mess, but I love it. And it's home. It's the only one I've ever had. So I'm glad my husband, who is very educated and a teacher, gave me the chance. And I have a sister-in-law, Florence, who is home today, and I made it. I came today. Your program is an educational program, really the first one I've had a chance, because I never had time for TV while I raised my kids. But I grew up without parents, and my mother is in a nursing home, and they wanted raises there. It's a hard job. They were breaking windows. I can't take care of her, but I do love her. I will see her. She was without legs.
And when you came back,
Passion today this is a very traumatic thing for me today.
you're doing very
And
well.
thank you. I love
That's all
your
right.
time. My husband would love it. He's a beautiful person.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You did very
I'm
well.
shaking.
I know you are, but you've done very well. You've communicated a real feeling, and I thank you for
Marilyn
speaking
is
up.
beautiful too.
Oh, I agree with that too.
I
Yeah.
had some babysitting children about 4 or 5 years ago identifying me with her, and it made me good because I tried babies.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming with us and sharing that today. Good. I'm glad you're here. Yes, she is wonderful. Yes, would you stand, please?
Speaking about this gentleman earlier that said about subdivisions and building subdivisions, I thought that the main reason for putting these people in the homes would be to sort of streamline them, mainline them into the society. Whereas if you're going to build a subdivision, aren't you segregating them just like as they would be in an institution?
I think that you would be. That's why I disfavor that idea. We wanted to have retarded people and other handicapped people recognized as human beings. And the only way you really can do that is expose the rest of us who think we have no handicaps to them. And after the exposure, we'll see that we all are very much alike. We all have our differences. We have our gifts and we have our handicaps.
Okay. Yes, would you stand? What?
Aren't they all staying in the house all day long anyway? They stay in the house all day long anyway in the houses.
I don't think so.
No.
Go to the house all the time.
They do go to school if they're a school age, or they go to work or workshops during the day.
That's great education stuff too.
Yes, would you come over here? Well, partly, anyhow.
I'd like to know what kind of facilities they're in before they're placed into the group homes and what kind of selection processes is used to decide.
People come from institutions that were placed there years ago. That's where the majority come from. Some people come from their own natural families where the parents haven't been able to cope, or because their families have reached an age where they no longer are capable to care for them.
Pardon?
Really insane too.
Are they from the so-called asylums, too?
There has been a push, and there is continuing at this time, a program for the placement of the mentally ill. And while Mr. Provensal's program deals primarily with those that are mentally retarded or developmentally disabled, there is a similar program taking place for the placement of the mentally ill. And I think that this is also a subject of grave concern to the homeowners.
Isn't it true that the ultimate aim is to close the institutions, the traditional ones that we've lived with for many years, and to get people out into the communities and into the mainstream?
That's
Reduce
true.
that population
It's-
by an enormous amount.
It's to close the Gothic horrors of the past. That's right.
The bedlams.
That's right.
But I think that the horrors of the past were horrors of improper care and of improper treatment. And I have to reemphasize that people should stress the care, the quality of the care. We should place our tax dollars on getting the very best staff possible to take care of these people.
We're out of time, Mr. Schuster. I'm sorry to have to interrupt, but it's totally gone, Mr. Provencal. Mr. Schuster, thank you much for sharing this much with us today. I know we could go on forever.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be right back.